For more on the crash, we're joined now by Brian Foley, an aviation expert in New York City. Brian, so many people are still trying to digest this news. We heard from the French prosecutor this was not a mechanical failure, a deliberate act by the co-pilot, saying his actions were deliberate because he refused to respond, refused to let the captain in, then programmed the autopilot. But even having heard all that, can we be so sure, in fact, this was a deliberate act when only they're basing it on the voice data recorder?
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was the first thing I was going to mention too. You know, it sounds like the jury's finished and the trial's over. You know, in fact, there's more research to be done. There's things to do beyond the cockpit voice recorder. For instance, using flight data recorder, which can kind of correlate the noises in the cockpit to the different movements of the flight controls on the airplane. So there's more to this homework assignment. And while it, you know, seems to lead in that direction, you know, why not, you know, maybe the lockout switch had a short in it and it was locked out all along without human intervention. So there's still a tiny slit of a door open that maybe there's a better explanation. And I think the world is hoping there is one. But for now, that doesn't seem to be the way that we're hearing it.
You know, this French prosecutor was extremely forthcoming, really gave chilling details about what they had found out. He also said they detected normal breathing from the cockpit, from the co-pilot, that there wasn't breathing. It was a normal breathing. It didn't sound like someone who was having a stroke. Absolute silence, not a single word. But he's not a doctor. I mean, can they really determine based on his breathing there were, in fact, no medical issues?
Yeah, while he was a young man, apparently in good health, if he was running marathons and doing other things, of course, you could breathe normally when you're not awake and alert. You know, he could have been unconscious and potentially, you know, still breathing regularly. So to, you know, basically declare that that's the cause of the accident, I think is a little premature.
So because of what has happened now, do you expect to see changes? You know, in Europe, I mean, in the US, you have to have at least 2 people in the cockpit. Are we going to see more airlines outside of the US doing that? And what about the idea of cameras in the cockpit?
Absolutely. I think you'll see very quickly a change in procedures around the world, and particularly having another person in that cockpit, you know, whether it be a flight crew attendant, you know, that goes in there when someone else comes out. But even that's not foolproof. I mean, that can help reduce the risk even further. But if those 2 people happen to be in communication before the act, the same thing could happen. But of course, having 2 in the cockpit could substantially reduce the risk of that happening again. You know, one thing to point out to the folks in China is there's some parallels to some things that happened on Malaysia 370, which was very close to the Chinese people. You know, one of the theories of why that flight disappeared was the same situation, where the pilot could have left, the other one shut the door, locked it, kept him out,
but Brian,
and the plane
that flight
disappeared.
vanished. We have not seen a trace of that. There is actual wreckage of this one in the French Alps. We still don't know what happened to that Malaysian flight.
Yeah, but the point is, the authorities at that time could have said, hey, you know, we should start looking at these doors now, because this is a possibility what happened to 370, but instead we focused all our resources on how should we track planes in the future instead of getting to the root problem, which could have been a door situation just like the French Alps. So well, that's the parallel I'm trying to make.
Okay, understood. Well, let's get back to the Germanwings flight. What do you think is next in this investigation? What happens now? I understand the French have asked the FBI to help them. What is the FBI going to do? Walk us through the process.
Yeah, any plane situation like this is a very tedious process. You know, human nature, you want to know what happened now. You want an answer now. You don't want to wait. You want some, plausible explanation. But generally in airplane world, it's a very gradual process. And the authorities might just release some factual information that the plane crashed on this heading, at this speed, at this altitude, at this time, and very general information. And it could take months or even years to come to some type of conclusion. So in the near term, there'll be a lot of work being done, both on the criminal side to look into personalities and backgrounds of some folks. But at the same time, the people who look after the aircraft will be sifting through the wreckage to try to find some clues, to try to corroborate the theory that it could have been the co-pilot that did this.
And very quickly, if Lufthansa in fact knew that this co-pilot had some kind of mental issue and did not disclose that, is there a liability here for Lufthansa?
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer. I can't address that, but certainly, you know, the pilots themselves have to be, you know, in pretty good health, go through some rigorous physicals on a 6-month basis after a certain age, so they do keep at them. But, you know, there could always be a rogue situation that would be very hard to, you know, spot in day-to-day operations. And if that's the case, this could have been one of them.
All right, Brian Foley, we appreciate your time, sir.
You're welcome.